It's emerged that foreign criminals deported from Britain after committing often serious offences, including murder and sexual offences, well, they're receiving cards loaded with £2,000 in cold, hard taxpayers' cash. 5,000 foreigners convicted of crimes were deported from the UK last year, and the removed individuals are entitled to the significant amount of taxpayer-funded money under the so-called facilitated return scheme that is meant to be used to encourage reintegration in their home country. Lovely, isn't it? Well, I'm joined in the studio by GB News' political editor Chris Hope and also GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. So, Chris, we're talking about this story because there's some astonishing footage today that shows Romanian deportees that have been in prison, variety of very serious offences, physically, literally being given credit cards with £2,000 on, which they can plug into an ATM when they land, ka-ching. We know they're entitled to this money, but the video makes it absolutely breathtaking that British taxpayers are lining the pockets of foreign criminals for them to spend when they land. It's a joke.
Shabana Mahmood, who's the new Home Secretary, 3 weeks in the job, she says this, out of context, it's not great. It doesn't look good. Well, you're telling me you're giving here charged up cards, 2,000 quid on each one to criminals or people being deported, certainly, out of this country. Now, what we're told is it does represent a saving on the cost of having them put it up in prisons. If that were the case, that'd be £54,000 a year. They're saying it's been, Shabana Mahmood says it's been a long time that we have been offering financial packages as an incentive to people who drop their claims. So the idea is they drop their claims to stay here, but they get £2,000. Yes, a lot of money, but a very bad look.
And we know that they're entitled to this, but I don't think people were it was so transparent that it was this blatant. Literally, people on this flight, you can see on your screen now, they're sat down. Some of them are having to be restrained to their seats. They're being flown back to Romania, and they're literally being given credit cards with £2,000 on. And there's a second story out today as well, which I think makes it even more... Here's that footage now, look. So the camera is going down the aisle on a flight. This flight is packed full of people being deported back to Romania. In a short moment's time, you will see a credit card literally being taken out of an envelope and given to a foreign criminal. There it is on your screens now. That's somebody who presumably works for the Home Office, Border Force.
Here's some money, off you go.
Here's some money, £2,000 on a card, handed straight to a foreign criminal. This is the kind of thing, Chris, that makes people feel...
It's like a credit card. It's like you get through the bank. This is 50 foreign national prisoners filmed by ITV News. The first time cameras have been on board the plane. This is the reality, frankly, of trying to get foreign national offenders out of this country. More will happen. The rules changed earlier this week to allow Shabana Mahmood to remove people who have served less than 30% of their time here, not 50%. 6 staff accompanying every passenger up the stairs to prevent them from fleeing. But the point the government would make, were they here, is that it does save long-term a lot of money of housing them in prison. £54,000 a year, £2,000 on a card is good value, but it is shocking to see it.
Do you know how much British prisoners get when they come out of prison? 46 quid. 46 quid. They give them 46 quid and off you go, son. £2,000 to a Romanian sex offender.
I don't know, but can they access benefits when they get out? Can they get any support from local services?
They're British. These are foreign criminals getting a £2,000 paycheck on a fly home. I think people look at this and think we've absolutely lost our minds. And there's more. A second story out today, Chris Hope, about taxes. An astonishing sum of money being spent on taxes for asylum seekers. An investigation today, £344,000 a month to one taxi company in the south and Wales from Clear Springs. Of course, that's paid for by the Home Office. Stories about asylum seekers being driven 250 miles for a GP's appointment to get their knee checked.
£600 later now. Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary, is going to investigate the use of taxis. Why can't they be bussed? I'd imagine she's launched an urgent review into the use and cost of these taxis to transfer asylum seekers from hotels for appointments. Again, not new, but what we're seeing is... Seeing it on camera, that's a BBC investigation you've got there. The earlier one is an ITV investigation. When this is seen by ordinary people, they can't believe it. It seems the wrong priorities for what we're told is a cash-strapped country facing major tax increases in barely 2 months' time.
And I put it to you again, we've got a new Home Secretary and the same old problems.
But she's new eyes on it, so to be fair to her, she's investigating taxis, she knows how bad the card looks, she's aware of it.
Stop them. Don't investigate them. It's lunacy. First of all, that an asylum seeker can get a GP appointment. Most viewers watching this probably struggling to get an appointment themselves. But to be ferried there by a taxi, paid for by the taxpayer.
He probably waits outside, that's why it's so expensive. But 250 miles is a long way to go to a doctor.
Today.
OK, let's bring in my next guest now, if they're ready, and that's the former Director General of the UK Border Force, Tony Smith. Tony, welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to have your company. Tony, none of this is new. We know that these payments are handed out to each deportee. We know that asylum seekers get free taxes, but it comes at a time, I think, where we are reaching crisis point. The public are looking at this and just thinking this country is an utter joke.
Yeah, I'm sure many people who weren't aware of this will be quite shocked at this report that's been revealed that this is what is happening, Martin. But I can tell you this has gone on for a long time, even going back to my time in the Home Office, where we've had these schemes like the FRS, the Voluntary Assisted Return Scheme. We've always adopted a carrot and stick approach to removals. Removals are really hard to do, particularly where people are resistant. If you can persuade people to be compliant, to withdraw applications for asylum, to go quietly, then, actually giving them some small financial incentive to enable them to resettle themselves when they get back home isn't such a bad deal. And I think you'll find quite a lot of the 35,000 removals the government have been talking about, they've achieved since they came into power, will have been offered some sort of scheme like this as an inducement to go back rather than to stay here and fight the system, Martin. The other thing I would say is that this is really difficult, getting these people on these planes. I've seen it, I've been there. We have to sometimes put them in chains. There's a risk assessment on every single one of these people, Martin. Some of them are very, very dangerous, nasty people. Getting somebody on a plane and getting them to be compliant on a 3-hour flight, you don't want to put the flight at risk. You want absolutely that to be safe and secure. That is also a real challenge. Now, what we use is commercial airlines, which we charter, and we use private sector, fully trained, fully equipped, often ex-military people to do it. But it's a real devil of a job to actually enforce a removal. So I can understand why, if you can encourage people to be compliant, you might want to invest in that. But at the same time, I can see exactly what you're saying, Martin, how it might look to people that, these are serious criminals. Why should the taxpayer be having to fork out to give them some money to go back?
And on what planet is it a good idea, do you think, to ferry asylum seekers to GP appointments 250 miles away? They're legally entitled to the GP they were first appointed with when they came into the country. And if they move to an HMO 300 miles away, they keep the same GP. Yet again, People look at this, Tony Smith, and just think the lunatics have taken over the asylum system.
Yeah, so we've spoken about this before, Martin. If I had my way, I'd detain them all. At the moment, they get off the boat in secure detention. We did that before. We've had doctors and dentists in detention centres. If they're ill, they can get help. But we should not be releasing vast numbers of asylum seekers into the community, in my opinion. We've got to a custom practice, really, where people go 24 hours straight through Manston into a hotel, and then there's a scramble to find out where they can go next. They don't stay in the same place all the time. They're moved around. And, of course, their doctors are still in the previous. So what the Home Office tend to do is put their hands in their pockets and say, well, that's all right. Let's just keep them happy, keep moving them around, carrying that process has to change, Martin. We have to look at our asylum support system, because you're right, these things keep coming out day by day, week by week. We are spending inordinate amounts of money on our asylum support system, and I would like to see that fundamentally change. And ideally, we ought to be investing now in more immigration detention centres, so people coming here will be detained, have their cases swiftly processed, and then be removed from the territory. But I just don't see anyone talking about doing that from the mainstream political parties right now, or at least I haven't seen any evidence of government going in that direction for some time now. But I think that's what's required. We need a really radical change to the way that we initiate our asylum support systems in this country, because I think people are quite rightly getting completely fed up with it.
Tony Smith, I think you're absolutely right. And, let's be patient. We have a new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. She says she's going to talk tough and act tough. Let's give her time to do that. She's only been in the job 5 minutes. Fair play. But we can't carry on like this. We cannot carry on like this before people just start to think, we just lost the plot. We've lost the plot as a nation. We've lost the plot in terms of who's paying for this, who's funding it. It can't carry on. Tony Smith, always a delight to get your huge experience on this, and thanks for coming on the show today. Now, we've got a quick writer reply from the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who said, out of context, it's not great. It doesn't look good. But she added, voluntary removal is actually cheaper for the British taxpayer. It has long been the case that we do offer financial packages as an incentive to people to drop their claims and drop the attempts they make to stay in our country and to board a flight and leave. Now, before we get Nigel Nelson and Chris Hope, I believe you've got some breaking news on the calamity with Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes, away from this debate on Home Affairs, big weekend this weekend, Labour Party conference. Now, we now have your party, which is the party established by Jeremy Corbyn. That's being is now founding conference announced for Liverpool on the weekend of the 29th and 30th of November, just days after the budget. A huge moment here, potentially, for the left and for the Labour Party.
If they stop falling out.
If they start falling out.
Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn have been at each other like cats and dogs.
Yes, that may end. It is battling right now over that, but we have now a date for the founding conference. Before that, we should get a full name too. It's called Your Party, that's a holding name.
Thank you very much. Breaking news there on Your Party. Nigel Nelson, let's bring you in on the previous story, if I could. People are looking at this now and thinking it's absolute insanity. It's borderline insanity. Can Shabana Mahmood turn this monster around?
Well, first of all, on the taxes, she obviously didn't know anything about them at all.
Why not?
Which is why. Well, this is the crux of the problem with the Home Office. Too much traffic goes through the Home Office. They spend all their time firefighting. And one reform policy I do agree with is split immigration off from the Home Office and make it into a separate government department.
It's too big now. It needs its own department.
Yeah.
We agree on that.
Yeah. OK. So we agree there. So first of all, she'll investigate and find out why it's happening. There must be a more efficient way of doing it. When it comes down to the £2,000 payments, that dates back to 2006 when they were first introduced. Getting prisoners out of the country is tricky, not just for the reasons that Tony was talking about, physically putting them on planes, getting the agreement of the country they're going to.
You've got to bribe them to go.
We can't just drop them off. And to an extent, yeah, but also it is cheaper. It is cheaper if they will go voluntarily than if they end up staying and fighting it through the courts.
Here's a point. How about everyone who's a foreign national who commits a serious crime in Britain is deported immediately? Forget about going to a British jail. Forget about £2,000 sweetener. Off you pop.
That's exactly what's going to happen. Chris mentioned the fact that the sentences they have to serve before deportation have now gone down to a third. It will go down to nothing. That the plan now is, when new legislation can go through, is they'll be deported immediately on conviction. OK, well, again, let's give Shabana Mahmood time to turn this around. I feel if they don't, they're going to be sunk as sure as the Conservatives were